Regal shows off a new type of dark chip, one hidden within normal-seeming battle chips so the user won't know they're infecting their Navi until too late. Oh hey, the anime finally caught up with the game's release where that's how gameplay-wise those were used, especially in Battle Network 5. With this chip being handed over to a new patsy of theirs. After all, Yuriko can't do all the heavy lifting. This is at the same time the net savers keep finding supposed dark chip warehouses abandoned. Though this time, finding someone having been taken prisoner there? This is so totally a trap. And yeah, this is where we had the anime debut of Aneta, who in the games was something of a sociopath, but here, well, we'll get into that. It's not surprising in retrospect they'd want to keep her around, though. While in English this was one of the few of Morike Hendrix's notable roles, which unfortunately also includes Tabby from Dot Hack Roots, but they also played Luna Maria Hawk from Gundam Seed Destiny and Revi from Black Lagoon. Well, for her Japanese actress, Rie Kugimiya, this was the early side of what's been shown to be a long and successful career, voicing Nana Trinity for yet another Gundam 00 cast member to be part of this series, but also Louise in The Familiar of Zero, Alphonse Elric in Fullmetal Alchemist, Mary Goodwin in Xenosaga, Agnese in the Raildex franchise, and Rise Kuchikawa from Persona, just to name a few. She's inserted into their group as an eyewitness to the dark chip smuggling that was abducted to silence her over what she saw. Though as usual, Enzan thinks something sus about this, as he swears he recognizes her. And thanks to Plot Exposition Playhouse via a news broadcast, we get an idea as to why, as Aneta's only recently recovered from hospitalization, having been part of an incident at another hospital where a system malfunction set the place on fire, and it was only due to the intervention of a net saver that the patients even lived. The exposition drop says this happened half a year ago, but due to the sliding timescale the series eventually ends up operating under, it's iffy considering Enzan's only been deputized as long as Neto has, and the season has not been showing 6 months have passed since its start. Sure, it has, in real time, but if you don't accept the reality that incidents like this occur more frequently than once a week, you get the mess of the Pokemon anime where Ash should be like 17 or 18 by this point if you count each Pokemon region as taking him a year to clear. And even internally in the Battle Network timeline, both the games and the entire anime take place inside of 3 years. But yeah, what happened during that incident is she was injured in a hit-and-run traffic accident, and was helped through her physical therapy by a medical Navi named Silk, who she grew immensely attached to, as Silk was the only one to encourage her that she could recover. But during the fire, she witnessed Blues deleting her. Seeing that further traumatized her, as Silk was basically the only one she'd felt was her friend. Thus, why Aneta's helping Nebula is they're using those feelings and twisting them to their own purposes in letting her act out her revenge on the one she believes was responsible, Enzan. Even as she herself doesn't know the full story behind why that all happened. But knowing what she does, it's understandable for her to be angry, and look for an outlet for that anger in confronting those she feels is responsible, right in that determination or no. However, it's important to note the nuance of how that is executed, thanks in part to Masashi Kubota being the writer for this one, as nuance, as I've been bashing into your heads, is not something half the writers on the show do well. But throughout all of this, they've written and presented Aneta as being conflicted about the choice she is making, as the Darkblade incidents and the dark ships triggering them are becoming more public. So, does she want to endanger more people, just for her own petty revenge? And by proxy, this also addresses something else in the storyline as well, Enzan's own ruthlessness. We've seen before from him that he has no hesitation in having Blues attack to kill, being willing to choose deleting Navis as a first choice with regards to dealing with problems. Now to be fair, we have also seen him be able to judge when that would be necessary, so it's not his default to everything, as we saw with Raika and Searchman. But he is more willing to jump to that step as the fastest means of resolving a conflict. Aneta's story here thus acts as consequences for him in relation to that. She is someone victimized by that attitude who is now being used by the actual villains of the series as a weapon against him. And he really has no one to blame but himself for it, and the fallout that results from this is an entire plot line that ends up needing to be resolved. This, again, is all why I feel the character is much better used in the anime than her game counterpart is, where in the games, she's just an unthinking, gullible eco-terrorist, as why she's doing what she is far more fleshed out, grounded, and relatable, and on top of that, explored in the anime. I love Battle Number 3, but it is impossible to say they didn't use Aneta better in the anime. Regardless, Aneta observes as Yuichiro does an analysis of Neto and Enzan's physical condition. Since cross-fusion is still a new technology, they don't know the consequences of its use on the human body long-term yet, and with Regal here, well, why not? But while they're busy, Aneta slips the Dark Sword chip into Enzan's battle chip pack, before being given orders to take the boys out to a place where the Dark Lords will be waiting. And the shipping begins! Oh my, does the shipping begin! Said place is the Akihara Shopping Tower, a high-profile, all-in-one, high-rise shopping complex built out of a standard office building. Yeah, a reason why most malls are usually 2 or 3 stories tall. Any taller than that, and they end up having difficulty actually moving merchandise into the building, as there ends up being a shortage of loading docks supply trucks can reach, to say nothing about occupancy or parking limitations. Neto, because he's curious about Enzan's, well, change of heart on this whole affair, follows them on what can't be described as anything else but a date. This, as I said, helps create the air that Aneta is conflicted about everything, as the guy she hates for what he did, he's actually a nice person deep down, and it's seeing him be nice to a wheelchair-bound girl that gets her to spill about her being in that incident earlier, which Enzan had already figured out. Before we can get more into that, however, the fire alarms all go off, sealing them in and causing oxygen to be vented from the building as a fire suppression measure. Fire extinguisher foam makes more sense to use still. Any damaged products in a mall like this would be covered by insurance. But this brings back up Aneta's trauma. As minus the lack of an actual fire, these are the exact same circumstances Silk died in, trying to unseal the building to save those trapped inside it. Enzan sends Blues in, only for them to be confronted by Needleman. Man, Needleman must not have much time left if Yuriko's going that overboard with the dark chips for this. I actually do not remember Needleman ever suffering from dark chip corruption. What the hell? It's all to force Enzan to start burning his battle chips in order to trick him into using the tainted sword chip, as otherwise that many dark chips is too much for even Blues to handle. But it's Enzan's own resolve to save them from this that truly does get to Aneta, revealing the circumstances around Silk's deletion aren't what she thought, and that he'd already found the dark chip in his pouch that she'd slipped in. The truth of what happened to Silk wasn't that Blues killed her callously, it's that Silk had sacrificed herself. The only way she had to hack the system at the time to get Aneta and the others out was to fuse herself with the system and use her own frame to suck the dark aura that had disrupted it out of it. Blues deleting her, allowing it to be purged from the system. Sometimes there's no way to save someone other than through sacrifice, and Blues and Enzan were merely the means she chose by which to commit suicide. Also Aneta would live. But while that might seem like a cop-out, if you've been paying attention to my analysis of Enzan's character throughout these reviews, it does inform something else. Bar when the bad writers have had their turn at the wheel, Enzan has been coming off as a kinder individual for a while now, and with this being from an incident months ago, it acts as a retroactive reasoning as to why. Enzan knew who Aneta was this entire time, and has been acting unusually kind to her throughout all of this. It's clear the incident had stuck in his mind as, what happened wasn't him being callous, but caused him to reconsider how he acted. That is still something that comes from a consequence, a reflection on your own actions. And even then, this isn't something Aneta herself refused, that there were other options from that. But inevitably, that's the anger Aneta stuck with, that someone died because of her, and she just has no way to know how to respond to that. And that's the key thing here. It's easy to lash out and blame someone else. But when you're partly at fault for why you lose someone important to you, there's no simple way to come to terms with that. And once more, that makes someone open to manipulations, as Nebula did, to give them someone to direct that anger at, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. Even so, it's once more important to recognize Anetta's hesitation throughout all of this. She knew it was wrong, and it was eating at her just as much to go through with it. Thus, in a way, she's thankful they stopped her, as now she can come clean about the truth of this true Dark Soul Dark Chip, and the one who gave it to her.
一体こんなもの誰が？
ドクター・リーガルよ。
ドクター・リーガルだって？
Oh look! That guy that totally looks like the bad guy is actually the bad guy! Before they can get an explanation, Anetta's abducted by Yuriko, meaning we've got to rescue her in the next episode, which is looking to lead into an even larger confrontation, as Shademan's personal dimensional area generator is finished, and Bubbleman's gotten him the direct link to Nebula's private server from his infiltration axe, meaning it's looking to be a three-way brawl for it all next time. The wrap-up. We have soft-hearted revenge scheme to Anetta's role in the story. We have suicide by cop to Silk and Anetta's backstory. We have I knew all along to Enzan and Netto setting up a sting to turn Yuriko's trap back on them. The reason I didn't comment on Netto's perceived bouts of idiocy that Rockman complained about is it's pretty clear in retrospect that Netto was following Enzan's lead in this confrontation of whatever Anetta got herself involved in, and Netto was just playing up an oblivious role for any observer. Once again at the dead center of the series and helmed by one of the writers that knows what they're doing, we get a really strong character piece out of this one, that introduces someone who's going to act as the new main/recurring character for the rest of the series, and a far better paramour of interest for Enzan than the mess with Yaito, as it's far stronger as a personal story between the complications they have with their history and the means by which it is overcome and likewise paralleled, a lot of which comes from the events immediately following from it. For there was another big plotline directly lifted from Battle Network 4 that was wise for them to capitalize on, and capitalize on it they did.